Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Slice a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy roundtable, fantasy roundtable, yeah. Fantasy roundtable, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy roundtable, fantasy roundtable, woo. Fantasy roundtable, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to a Friday edition of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. I am your host today, Matthew Fox, and joining me today is Dennis. How are things in Ohio?
It's hot today, very hot today, which leads me to the question, can you hear my air conditioner?
A little bit. It's not too bad.
Okay.
But, you know, we don't want to see you pass out. So
Right. You know, I had my son start it like 4 hours ago, but when I had it off, it was like, man, still a little warm in here. But we'll see. You know, things are looking good in Ohio. Putting the finishing touches on the swimming pool. Now we just got to let the water get up to temperature. And looking forward to having a great weekend, talking some buys and sells. How about yourself?
Yeah, you know, all week it would have been natural for people to be prepping their pools for the summer. In fact, yesterday it was 89 degrees. Currently, I am staring at a rain-snow mix, which is part of the reason I was a little slower getting home. And it is a grand total of 36 degrees right now. So we are riding the roller coaster here in Colorado. The kids just got out of school. All the high school graduations were this week. And I'm sure they're really embracing what it means to be in the summer season right now.
Move to the mountains. It'll be fun. The weather.
The ironic thing is we got 1/10 of an inch of snow the entire month of April. And now apparently today we're supposed to get anywhere between 3 and 12 inches. Gotta love it.
I told my wife.
On that note, we are going to have a fun show today. Matt Bruning is not with us today. He is out living his best life, but he should be back on Monday. Before we dive in, wanted to say that we are a proud part of the Pigskin Podcast Network, and we would love it if you would come and rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. That really helps us, and we appreciate your support. Dennis and I are going to be doing some Dynasty buy or sells today. Well, we got a fun message. Apparently, even Toronto was 75. So Colorado just, bucking the trend. We're going to do some Dynasty buy and sells by position. Before we dive into that, there are a couple of news items I thought I'd get your take on. The first, poor Tariq Cohen, man. ACL tear that's kind of knocked him out of 2 full seasons. Free agent, was trying to do a workout on Instagram Live probably to show off the wares. Blew his Achilles. Have we seen the last of Tariq Cohen?
I'm gonna say no. Recently I think it was The Athletic or maybe the Players Journal, I forget which, put out a story on his, kind of published his story, what it was. And it was really kind of amazing story of perseverance and hard work, overcoming some obstacles and some life challenges put in front of him. And so it feels like he's got what it takes to fight through it. And then an Achilles is a bad injury, especially for running backs. But we saw Cam Akers come back pretty quickly. I think we're looking at a fairly quick recovery for James Robinson going into this year. I think he's going to be, it isn't going to be the year plus recovery. And the one thing Cohen has going for him is the dude weighs like 160 pounds. So it isn't like he's, Saquon Barkley thunder thighs or A.J. Dillon thunder thighs slamming, 235, 240 pounds on that Achilles making cuts. His game is predicated on quickness. He's a small receiving back. and it happened. It's what, May? I think next year at this time we're going to see him signing on with a team, a free agent, prove it deal, and he's got the moxie that you like to see in a player to come in and contribute. He may not contribute right away. He'll have to climb up the depth chart, but he'll play special teams. He'll do what is needed. So I like his desire, his opportunity. I don't know that he's going to be fantasy relevant. That would be now I could see him if he makes it, so it'll be a year and a half, pretty close to when the season starts next year. So I could see him being, the receiving option next to someone like Ronald Jones that can't catch for shit. Something like I could see him moving in that direction and taking on kind of that receiving running back role for a team, for somebody that, let's say the Texans this year, if somebody's in that status next year where, they've torn it down and they're trying, maybe the Atlanta Falcons next year, as they're in cap hell this year. Next year, they're going to need to put some more players on there and start to actually build the team. We know running back is where most teams go cheap. So I could see him becoming flex worthy again in maybe 2024, but I'm not paying a lot to get the opportunity to see it.
Yeah, so I would like to root for him too. He does have a good story. He's already almost 27. By the time you get to next year, he'll be almost 28, and he won't have really played a meaningful role on the football field since 2019. I think he's going to work his way back, but I think he probably has to get a shot somewhere like a XFL or USFL and pop a little to get a camp invite, because unfortunately for him, I'd say like one of the biggest challenges too is we have not seen the running back position seemingly being valued by NFL teams the way it was even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And there's so many, kind of young undrafted free agents or guys that you can put in there. Cohen was solid for a few years there with Chicago. I wouldn't say he was ever exactly spectacular. And that's why I think he's got to go somewhere and show that he still has some pop to get a shot somewhere. And I hope he does, but definitely sad news to see this injury pop up. The other big piece of news this week is Deshaun Watson has begun his meetings with the NFL to decide if he violated the personal code of conduct. Some people thought that might not happen until after the civil cases were settled, but it looks like the NFL is ready to move forward on that. I would say the timing of where they're doing them, beginning here in May, means that they're looking to arrive at some kind of a decision before the season. If you're a Cleveland fan or a fantasy player that rosters Watson, how closely are you watching these proceedings?
I'm watching very closely. I felt it was my understanding that the NFL wanted to kind of wait and see how things played out with the court case. Then the courts pushed it off till after the season. And after the Trevor Bauer case, I think that the NFL started to get some heat about women's rights and, treating people fairly. And, these accusations are pretty severe. And so I think that at the office, they felt like, the PR hit wasn't worth it to hold it off until after the court stuff. So they started moving ahead. They put it on the docket. I don't know that they're going to make, I have no idea what they're going to do. Could they put him on the commissioner's exempt list and kind of help tell the courts, hey, really help us if you'd push this up? Not that the courts are going to do that, but, but maybe then Watson could say, hey, I want to appeal to get an earlier court date or something like that. I don't know. If I'm rostering him, and I do roster him in a couple spots, I'm trying to make sure I have a serviceable backup so that I can, maybe make a run, and we'll see how it goes out if he misses half of this season. And I also see a world where they go through their process regardless of what happens with the court case, and they decide, you know what, you're suspended for 8 games, and then after the court case, they may revisit. They may, just say, well, that's that. We already had our investigation, and we did what we felt we needed. We did what we felt was appropriate. We're not going to get him again. So, if you're trading for him, you're making lowball offers, and just trying to play on the insecurity of other managers. So I don't mind rostering him and sitting him if he ends up getting sat. Most of my leagues, I don't think you can put him on the IR if he's suspended. So he will take up a roster spot, but I don't have that many shares of him. And even if he sits 8 games, if he sits all of 2022, he's going to be good when he comes back. He was very, very good before, and missing 2 seasons and not getting beat up from an injury standpoint kind of is beneficial to his body as long as he's staying in shape.
Yeah, and I think the only thing that I thought in addition to that is it makes it kind of more interesting timing with the discussions around Baker Mayfield, because if you would have seen kind of no decisions made on Deshaun Watson, there might have been some more urgency to trade him. But I think we've seen Cleveland maybe not having incredible urgency right now, because if they're having these kind of meetings and discussions, you figure even if it lasts a couple more weeks and then they wait a couple weeks to make a decision, I would suspect we're going to hear something by the end of June, the beginning of July. And that, that gives them a clear direction. Do we need to consider, Watson gets an 8 to 12 game suspension, you're looking at maybe having Jacoby Brissett and saying, well, maybe we don't trade Baker right away.
Right.
Or, if Watson ends up coming out of this and they decide no suspension, or they suspend him for a game or 2, maybe then you're back into, do we need to push to trade him out? Do we need to release him? So a lot of potential impacts to both the Browns and fantasy going forward. All right, well, as promised, we are going to spin into Dynasty Buy or Sell. We're going to take a couple of players at each position. Some of them, are some of the most buzzed about and talked about players this offseason. First up, we're looking at quarterbacks, and these are a lot of young players that have a lot of questions coming into this year. The first of those is Zach Wilson for the Jets. He was the number 2 overall pick last year, played in 13 games, won 3-10, completed 55.6% of his passes, 33-34 yardage, 9 TDs, 11 INTs. Sometimes looked like the 3rd best quarterback on his own team, and that included the likes of the venerable Mike White and Joe Flacco playing games for him. But they've surrounded him with some weapons. He's got Elijah Moore kind of coming on. Corey Davis is still there. Braxton Berrios. They added Garrett Wilson in the draft. They added Breece Hall in the draft. They got a couple of tight ends. Michael Carter's still there. They added some linemen. They're trying to set him up for success. Are you buying it, Dennis?
Well, the things we're buying that the Jets invested in surrounding him with weapons. We're buying that he has a dynamic arm and that he's mobile. What we're selling is that, he kind of did look like the 3rd best quarterback on his team an awful lot last year. But he's young. He is mobile, athletic, and he's the guy. As much as, we may want to joke around and say, oh, well, Flacco, Mike White, this, that. Flacco is – I'm not sure why Flacco is still playing. He can't at this point.
He's still elite.
He cannot be playing under the premise that he's going to get an opportunity to compete for the starting job. Not in New York, not anywhere. And I'd like to think, he wouldn't be the first athlete to blow all of his money, though. So And Mike White is a journeyman. He's Colt McCoy. He may have a 10 or 12 year, 14-year career in the NFL, but he's not gonna. He's we saw it last year. He came in. He looked great for a game, and then he faded really, really fast. And that's what journeyman quarterbacks do. So I like that Zach Wilson is getting the opportunity to grow from last year. So on Sleeper's ADP, he's going as quarterback 24 and pick 168 in single quarterback leagues. At least I'd like to think he's not going to pick 168 in super flex leagues. So at that value, I definitely think he's worth drafting. I don't know that you're going to be able to trade for him with the perception that he's QB 24 because they did add Breece Hall. They did add Garrett Wilson. They've got Elijah Moore. They've got Corey Davis. I mean, they have a really strong set of weapons. CJ Uzoma is a great locker room guy and a very clutch player. Tyler Conklin, the same way. And they built on their offensive line with Fant, Tomlinson, McGovern, Elijah Vera Tucker. Becton's been a little bit shaky, but he started to come back on a little bit. We'll see what happens. I think the opportunity is there for them to explode. And if Zach Wilson finished his quarterback 12, I wouldn't be surprised. So he'd be a buy for me. If I'm able to get him at quarterback 16 to 24 value, he's a buy for me all day. You're muted.
Of course. I think for me, I'm going to lean more toward him being a sell, just because I think there is a lot of optimism about the Jets offense. And I looked at their schedule. I'm not sure they're going to have a great year. And I'm still not entirely sold that Zach Wilson is the guy to carry that team or is ever going to give you big fantasy returns. So if I find somebody that's hyped up about the Jets, I think I'm moving on from him.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the coaching staff is pretty secure right now. And so I do feel like there's about 4 years of security. It's definitely – I don't feel like it's a Matt Rule situation in New York. I feel like there's a solid base there with Saleh. And so to me, it's – I get it. If he's your second or third quarterback, it might make sense to sell him because his value could – if you can find somebody that values him at quarterback 12, then it might make sense to do it.
Well, our second to buy or sell quarterback is Tua Tagovailoa. He is entering his third season. He has started 21 games in Miami, 13-8 as a starter there. Career 66.2% completion percentage, 27 touchdowns against 15 interceptions. He's actually done reasonably well when they've given him a chance, but I think he's done better than people give him credit for sometimes, especially last year when the Dolphins got off to that horrendous start. He inarguably has his best set of weapons and the kind of offensive-minded coach that could allow him to succeed this season. Jalen Waddle's going into year 2. They went out and got Tyreek Hill. Mike Gesicki's coming back. They added Chase Edmonds in the backfield. So there are some things to like. They added Cedric Wilson at receiver there. They seem to be going all in, trying to give Tua a chance to succeed in the tightly packed AFC. Are you buying, Dennis?
Well, the things that we're buying that McDaniel will be successful. I think by and large, we've all felt like, all right, he's the next wonderkin. We're buying the Hill, Waddle, Gesicki are the basis of the offense, which means that they're going to pass. And a 5-yard completion that's taken to the house for 60 yards is 60 passing yards, the same as a 60-yard completion to the end zone is a 60-yard touchdown pass. So, I think if we're buying Tua at this point, we're buying him that he can start to approach the Drew Brees type of ceiling that, he's been – I feel like he's he's a good comp for Drew Brees. Not a great arm, good accuracy, very, very smart. We'll get him in the right play. But we're selling that he doesn't have a good arm. I question the temerity of the Dolphins posting that pass to Tyreek Hill when Hill has to slow down and turn around to catch the ball and, half-ass looks like a punt. But I don't think that they're going to throw an awful lot of that type of pass. I think that Tyreek Hill is amazing. Him and Jalen Waddle both are amazing at getting open in within 15 yards. Mike Gesicki's a big body and provides that. He's going to QB 18, pick 111. So he's going over 50 picks ahead of Zach Wilson. I'd be selling if he's going that high. I like Tua. I had Tua over Burrow coming out. One of the things that I didn't like about Burrow was he couldn't beat out Haskins at Ohio State, and then he only had the one real good year of production. Now, it was a phenomenal year of production at LSU, but the first year there, he didn't have a terrific season. But if I'm able to get, QB 16, 18, 14 maybe, ninth round startup value, 10th round startup value for Tua, I do think that's worth selling because I like guys like Zach Wilson a little bit more. I think Wilson has the more dynamic arm and an equal set of weapons. Whether or not Wilson throws more passes than Tua this year, I don't know. But to me, I think I'm selling Tua at QB 18 and pick 111.
Yeah, and for me, I like Tua. I think he's going to thrive. I liked him coming into the draft. I still think that potential for top 12 is there. So I'm actually buying because I think there are enough people that aren't believers that I can get him for below where I think his potential is. But definitely, these two are definitely their teams pushed all their chips in.
Yeah.
We're going to have to see. The third guy in our quarterback list is another one going into year two, and that is Trevor Lawrence, who went into last year's draft as a seemingly can't-miss quarterback prospect of the generations and got Urban Meyered. He went 3-14 as a starter, completed just under 60% of his passes, 3,600 yards, 12 TDs, 17 INTs. Didn't even look all that good a lot last season. Going into this year, they seem to indicate that they were loading up on weapons for him, if that's what you're calling mega contracts for Christian Kirk and Zay Jones alongside Laviska Shenault. They also are trying to bring Evan Ingram back to life under new coach Doug Peterson. There seems to be a lot of optimism for Jacksonville. Their early over-under is 7 wins. How are you feeling about Lawrence?
He's going off the board at QB 21 and pick 148. I'm buying that all day long. I think that everything about his profile coming out still matters. It's still relevant. Big arm, very mobile quarterback. He's got a new pass-friendly head coach. He's got a team that spent freely on the passing game weapons. Yeah, we can argue, well, was Kirk really worth that for, or who else did they bring in there? Kirk and
Zay Jones.
They
also have Marvin Jones.
Yeah, and so did they invest in an elite pass catching option? No, they didn't. But they did improve over, I think, the players that they had there last year, and they have a much better head coach. I mean, we can kind of shit on the way that Peterson crashed and burned at the end of his tenure in Philadelphia, but I think he's got some bona fides. He won a Super Bowl, and whether we like it or not, I think Trevor Lawrence is a substantially better quarterback and quarterback prospect than Carson Wentz and Nick Foles were. I think Lawrence is still a stud. I think he's top 8 potential easy with his skills and ability. I think next offseason, I'm going to take the under on their wins, because if they're smart, they're going to take the under to get a better draft pick and try to get themselves a young stud wide receiver that's coming out next year. So I want him at quarterback 21 and pick 148. I'm all about that. Now, granted, I also may have a vested interest, as in a startup last year, I did select Trevor Lawrence at the 103. So in a super flex league, so I may have a vested interest in him panning out. But I think quarterback 21 is dirt cheap for Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to smash accept on that all day.
Yeah. I don't really like what Jacksonville's done, and I'm not as confident of their coaching situation. Seems like there are still some people that are very excited about Trevor Lawrence. I've seen him traded for 2 firsts in a league this offseason. If I'm getting that, I am probably moving on from him, because I'm not as confident that his situation is good enough. Last year gave me a lot of pause, and I still don't think Jacksonville has done a lot to get better. I looked at their schedule. It's not very easy either, and the AFC is just really loaded now. So he's probably a sell for me. Our last quarterback is another second-year player, and this is probably, it's probably good our friend Matt's not with us, because I don't know if he could be impartial here, and that is Justin Fields, who had a miserable rookie year with the Bears, got 10 starts, went 2-8, just under 59% completions, 1870 in passing yardage, 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Didn't have much of the way of weapons that he had to throw to. Did make a little bit more of a splash rushing, had 420 yards and 2 touchdowns on 72 carries. This offseason has not been incredibly kind to him. Allen Robinson is gone. They got him Equanimous St. Brown, Byron Pringle, and Velus Jones to go along with Darnell Mooney and
They
Cole Kmet.
They almost add up to Allen Robinson if you stack them on top of each other.
They're before I finish this, Joe, I'll put up Joe's quote. They, the Bears don't have a great line and didn't exactly go in on an offensive-minded coach. Bears probably are in for a long season this year. How are you feeling about Justin Fields?
I am so torn as an Ohio State fan, because I love Justin Fields and I think he's a really, really good prospect. But he did struggle last year, and getting the coaching change and stuff, now all of a sudden you've got a front office and a head coach that didn't draft him. So they don't have to be as bought in. What I'm buying is he's got a big arm and he's got great mobility, as evidenced by the over 400 yards rushing. He sometimes is slow in his decision making. The team didn't invest in the offense. When you look at those guys, Velus Jones and Equanimous St. Brown, Byron Pringle, Tajay Sharp, Dante Pettis, that's not a that's not. He looks at the Jaguars receiving crew and goes, "Oh, I'm so jealous." I mean, it's a rough crew. So the team didn't do anything to help him this year, and I'm trying to figure out, what is it he's going to have to do, because he almost feels like he's in a no-win. He either completely puts his team on his back and he carries them to an unreasonable amount of victories, and they get a shittier draft pick, and who knows what they get. Who knows how this new front office will start to stack their draft classes, or he really stinks, or the team stinks. Maybe he plays okay, but they could just as easily go, you know what, we're going to go ahead and get our own guy and move on. I don't feel like he's in necessarily a great situation. He's coming off at QB 17 and pick 109. I think that's pretty aggressive because he's going one pick, 2 picks before Tua and 1 QB ahead of Tua, and a couple 30 spots ahead of Trevor Lawrence. I don't get that. I understand that he's got an amazing ceiling and a great big arm, but he's in a terrible situation. And we've seen good quarterbacks get broken before because the team is awful. Right now, if I'm getting, I kind of want to sell him or see if I can buy him low. In a 1 QB league, I was I'm in a rebuild, and I've got Javonte Williams. He's going into his second year now. And I'm like, I don't know. I think maybe I should just move on. So I offered Javonte Williams for what projects to be an early round first in 23 and Justin Fields. And I got rejected, encountered with Justin Fields in a late round first. But I don't know if I want to risk on a late round pick and Justin Fields in a 1 QB class on a team that I already do have Trevor Lawrence. So if I'm in a 1 QB league, so I declined it, but I feel like when this team is good, Javonte Williams is going to already be on his decline, and Justin Fields could be wrecked by the coaching staff in Chicago, and so I'm just nervous. I'm selling Justin Fields here unless I can get him, dirt cheap.
Yeah, and I think I'm selling too for the reason of how I
called him Justin Williams. It's Justin Fields.
Yeah, I think I'm selling too because of how high he's still going. You're right. Chicago is a mess this year. I don't know that they're trying to win, but if they are trying to win, they're not going to be successful. They're supposedly stockpiling a bunch of cap to go along with draft picks next year, but is that to build around Justin Fields, or is that to build around whoever this new GM Ryan Pohl wants to build? What is their philosophy? It's hard to tell what Chicago even really wants to do. So I'm probably trying to move on from that to find a truther. Before we leave quarterbacks, as we leave these positions, Dennis has a low budget option for you to go. He's calling it his dumpster dive. And who is your dumpster dive quarterback?
It's Jameis Winston. I get that Jameis has some interception issues in his past. And that Sean Payton, before Winston got injured last year, did his best to neuter Jameis's desire to take risks. But he's going off the board at QB 22, pick 133, and he's still just 28 years old? Let me see if it's on here. And he's on a decent, he's 28 years old, and he's on a team that I think many of us thought they were going to rebuild. They were so far over the cap. What were they going to do? Well, they went ahead and completely said, no, we're not. They made some trades. They cleared the cap. They invested in a new left tackle. They grabbed a first-round wide receiver. They're getting Michael Thomas back. They signed Jarvis Landry. They got Ingram and Kamara to pair in the backfield again. And I think an unheralded thing they did was they signed Abram Smith as a free agent running back. And every now and again, we'll get somebody that pops as a free agent. I think Smith has that ability. I mean, Mark Ingram's 31 now, 32? For a 5'9", 215-pound running back, he's built himself quite a career. But at QB 22 and pick 133, Jameis Winston is screaming value. And if I can go out and trade for him as a very low-end QB2, he's got QB1 upside. He's got the arm to really exploit what Chris Olave does well. And then that will take the pressure off of Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry underneath. And I feel like it's setting up for him to have a phenomenal season and bounce back. Now, could he throw 15 interceptions? He could. I could see him going 30 and 15 on the INT TD ratio. But I think I'd take it because he's willing to do things, take chances that other quarterbacks won't, because he believes in his arm and he believes in his receivers. And so I'm kind of willing to live with a couple of those mistakes. But yeah, QB 12 or QB 22 with QB 1 upside, screaming by.
All right. Well, we're going to move on. And for the next couple of positions, we're just going to take a couple guys at each position who've had interesting questions this offseason. For running backs, first one is Christian McCaffrey, a guy who was probably the consensus #1 pick in Dynasty the last couple of years going into the offseason, but he has really given people pause because he's only been able to appear in 10 games over the course of the last 2 seasons, rushing for 667 yards and 6 touchdowns on 158 carries during that time. He does still have 54 receptions in that period. But definitely not the production we've seen in the past. How are you feeling about Christian McCaffrey these days?
Well, I'd argue that it is the production we've seen in the past in the games that he's played, and that's the conundrum. He's going off in sleeper right now at RB5 and pick number 5, and at what point do you say I have to take him? I can't pass up the potential, even if it's going to put me behind the 8 ball if he doesn't. So maybe you definitely are going to try to handcuff him with Deontay Foreman, or they drafted a rookie. Who was it?
Chuba Hubbard they took year before last.
Yeah, and I thought they got somebody this year, but I guess not. So, I liked what Foreman did, completely different back. I can see a world where McCaffrey catches 100 passes and only carries the ball 125 times, and Hubbard and or Foreman get over 200 carries. I can, I think that world exists. Does that mean he's RB5? I don't think so. But he is, he's what, 5'11" and 215 pounds or something. 211 pounds. He's not big. It just, he's rocked up and he's fit. But we've seen little guys not take that beating. We hear Austin Eckler out there on his show with Liz Loza talking about, hey, it's in my best interest and it's in the team's best interest to limit the amount of times I'm running in there with the big guys. And I think we're at that point with Christian McCaffrey, and we have seen him be so efficient in the receiving game that I'm probably willing to take him late in the first. But if somebody's offering me running back 5 draft capital for him, I think I gotta sell him. But I could see taking him at the 9-10 range and being like, I just can't pass. I mean, last year in the Scott Fish Bowl, I had the 3rd pick, and he was coming off an injury-plagued season, and I'm like, you know what? I've got to, it's going to go Mahomes and McCaffrey. And I was building these teams around Josh Allen as the 3rd pick. And I'll be damned if the #1 pick in our league was Travis Kelce. And then Mahomes went 2nd. And I mean, at pick 3, I had to take McCaffrey. Now, this year, if it happens like that, I wouldn't do that. I'm going to go ahead and pass and take somebody I feel more comfortable with from the injury standpoint. But I'm selling at RB5.
Yeah, I'm selling too. There's a ton of people that are on the train that his injury situation can't last forever, and that possibly is true. But I'm with you. I think they added a Deontay Foreman and they have a Chuba Hubbard because they're going to do more of a split to try to keep him available in more games. I also am not a huge believer in this Carolina offense. They have not been very good, and maybe Matt Corral ends up having something. Maybe Sam Darnold's Tankapalooza at the end of last year was an aberration. I'm not a huge believer in this offense, and I just think Christian McCaffrey's value right now is at a place. We had this discussion a couple of years ago with Ezekiel Elliott. Do you try to sell him while he's still high, and maybe you're sitting facing him and he gets a 35-point game and you feel sad for a week? But overall, I think this is probably going to be the last of the high point of his value. You're already seeing him slide back off of it. Last year, there was rarely a question when somebody was the first pick in the draft about who they were going to take. Now you're seeing him slide back a little bit. I think that's only going to continue as he keeps going along. The other running back that we are going to talk about is a guy that is heading into his second year and has simply seen his value explode, and that is Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. They moved up in the second round to draft him last year. He was paired with Melvin Gordon in the backfield. He had 203 carries, got 903 yards, 4 touchdowns, caught 43 passes for 316 yards and 3 more touchdowns on 53 targets. For a long time this offseason, it looked like Williams was going to be the king of the roost in that backfield. There's a lot of excitement with Russell Wilson coming in, the Green Bay Packers offensive coordinator coming in. They did re-sign Melvin Gordon, but that doesn't seem to have dampened enthusiasm for Williams, who a lot of people have ranked up in the top 5 of Dynasty running backs. Where is he for you, Dennis?
I still believe in the talent. We're buying that he's a really talented back. We've seen him be a good running back in the NFL. We're buying that they added Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson is going to make the right plays. What we're selling is we don't know for sure what Paul Hackett's going to do. You've got your ear to the ground there in Denver, so maybe you can elucidate it. But the team brought back Melvin Gordon. And while they didn't break the bank for Gordon, they trust Melvin Gordon. And I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 split, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's a 60-40 split and Gordon still has a prominent role, and it's another timeshare season. I love the talent of Javonte Williams, but I still think it is a timeshare. And he's going off the board at RB9, pick 18, so middle of the second round. I think that's fair value, especially because he does have a tremendous amount of upside. I could see him at, finishing as RB5. I don't see him getting into the top 3 with Melvin Gordon there, but I could see him having a top 5 season and relegating Gordon to more of a 30 to 35% touch share versus a 60 or a 40% touch share and 60 for Williams. It's fair value. I'd probably he's in that situation where I'd buy him for that, but I don't think I'd sell him for that.
Yeah, and so that's probably the thing. I'm not selling from the places that I have him because I'm a diehard Denver fan, but I was in a startup a couple of weeks ago, and Jonathan Taylor was first running back off the board. He was second. I took Najee Harris like 2 picks later and thanked him for the discount. His value is insanely high. I love him. I love how he's running, but I think people are thinking they're going to get 2020 Aaron Jones season where he's going to have like 21 touchdowns and dominate 3 down. If I can find somebody that's a true believer like that, I'm selling because I don't think his production return is probably going to match that hype.
Yeah, I almost think you have to sell him. Speaking of Zeke Elliott earlier, Zeke is my dumpster dive here. I'm a Elliott homer. You can probably see the Ohio State jerseys on the wall there behind me if you're watching on YouTube. He's called a beast for a reason. He's 6 foot tall and 225 pounds. He's got great speed and he delivers blows. He runs like a hammer. He's missed very little time, and he played injured last year with a torn PCL virtually all season. I don't think Tony Pollard has taken the job from him, and I think if Zeke gets injured, I think Tony Pollard splits shares with Rico Dowdle. He's going off at running back 15. Man, if I see Zeke make it into the second round like that, if I'm at 16, I'm trying to trade up to 201 to get him. Or no, he's at pick 32, so that would be what, middle or early middle third round. So if I see him there, man, I'm going for it. I think he's going to have a bounce back season. I think that Dallas has something to prove. Losing Amari Cooper does have an effect. I don't think Michael Gallup is replacing Amari Cooper. I do think that CeeDee Lamb is the passing game star. Gallup's going to have a good year. James Washington and Jalen Tolbert.
Dalton Schultz.
And no, I was thinking wide receivers. And Noah Brown. They're going to flash, but they're not going to be consistent. And I think that's going to come back to more of a run game focus for Dallas. At pick 32 and RB 15, I can't take Zeke Elliott fast enough.
Well, we're going to transition from running back to wide receiver, and we are going back to North Carolina. DJ Moore, and this one, Dennis will chuckle, it lands on the list because we got a question that sparked quite a debate about him or Keenan Allen. And I think the thing that a lot of us feel about DJ Moore is he's wide receiver 1 talent in a wide receiver 3 situation because of the quarterback and the uncertainty. But despite that, he did see 163 targets last year, catching 93 for 1,157 yards, 4 touchdowns, kind of a quiet 93 catch, 1,100 yard season because of how bad Carolina was. How are you feeling about DJ Moore these days?
I think Moore is a screaming buy, even at wide receiver 15. I feel like it's going to be the last year of Matt Rule. Superior quarterback class coming in next year. I would think if they can't re-sign him, because he's going into year 5, right?
Yep. Year 5.
So if they can't re-sign him, I got to think they franchise tag him. And, last year wasn't his first quiet 1,100-yard season. It was like his 3rd or 4th in a row. And so he's catching 80 passes, 90 passes, 1,100 yards. I think that the challenge is that the offense stinks to high hell. And if he could go from 4 touchdowns to 8 touchdowns, it would make a world of difference in how he's perceived. Does he get there this year with Darnold and Corral? I don't know. I really don't. But I'm going to retract my statement. At wide receiver 15, he's not a screaming buy. He's a buy. I definitely wouldn't sell him cheaply. But at pick 40, 45, so late in the 4th round. I mean, that's really good value for somebody that you think is probably going to give you 11 to 1,300 yards, 80 to 90 receptions, and probably 4 to 7 touchdowns.
Yeah, I agree with Toronto, Dave. He does seem to get volume, but he's yet to be in a good situation. He's like the new Allen Robinson. TDs are the thing you just never know about. He's been very consistent. He's had over 1,100 yards receiving each of the last 3 years, and he's had 4 touchdowns each of the last 3 years. You're right. If one of these years he pops for 8 to 10 with those numbers, then you're thinking about him differently. I like that spot. I like right around 15. I still think he does have wide receiver 1 talent. I just don't love the situation. You're right. Maybe that improves a little bit next year. But
he's getting the targets. He had his last 3 years, he's had 135, 118, and 163. So the targets are there. And so it wouldn't surprise me based on that type of volume alone if he all of a sudden just dropped a 1,600-yard 100 catch, 1,600 yard, um, 8 to 10 touchdown season. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's challenging with the quarterback, but
I think what I'm looking for is somebody who's out on him because of the situation. There are people out there that just don't value it, and then that's your chance to kind of jump in and scoop him up. But yes, there is no doubt he's good at football. He's just, some of these poor wide receivers, man, they just need to get a good break on a good offense. Can't be more excited for Allen Robinson this year, seeing him get to play with Matt Stafford. Our other wide receiver that we are going to put on this list is a guy who didn't have a big rookie year, but seems to be stepping into a big year two opportunity, and that's Rashad Bateman. He was a first-round pick for the Baltimore Ravens last year, but injuries got him off to a slow start. He appeared in 12 games, but only started 4, only saw 68 targets, caught 46 for 515 and a touchdown, so pretty modest showing. But his team, right before the draft, up and traded Marquise Hollywood Brown to the Arizona Cardinals and did not draft a wide receiver. So that kind of leaves Bateman standing alone at the top of the pecking order. There have been a lot of rumblings that are going to sign a veteran receiver. They haven't done it yet, and there aren't as many big names out there anymore. So how are you feeling about Bateman going into year two?
Well, the team clearly was comfortable letting Hollywood Brown go. They're going to be a run-centric offense, and with a healthy J.K. Dobbins and getting Gus Edwards back, and then we saw what they did, with the Four Horsemen last year, Tyson Williams and Latavius Murray and Devontae Freeman. They had an effective running game.
And Le'Veon Bell, you forgot Bell.
Yeah, but they had an effective rushing game, even with Lamar Jackson out. Huntley still ran the offense very well. So is he going to lead the team in targets? Probably not. I'm going to expect that's going to be Mark Andrews. Are Devin Duvernay and James Prochet going to have some good games? They are. But I do think that Rashad Bateman is stepping into the wide receiver one role on that team. And he's going to be good he's going to have 100-plus targets. He's not looking at the 150, 160 like some, but I could see him, hitting 105, converting 70 because they're not necessarily a lot of deep balls being thrown. And it'll be a lower passing volume offense with the way they run the ball. I know Lamar's running less and less, but he's still an effective runner, and it won't surprise me a bit if he plays 17 games, if he puts up another 1,000-yard season. It wouldn't surprise me if J.K. Dobbins puts up a 1,000-yard season. But that offense is going to revolve around Andrews, Dobbins, Bateman, and Lamar Jackson. So where's he coming off? Wide receiver 39, pick 95. What is that, around 7th round, maybe? 6th, 7th, 8th round. That's, to me, that's a screaming buy. He's the number one guy on the offense there. Is he going to be a wide receiver 1? He's probably not going to get that volume. But if he finished as wide receiver 20, would people be like, that's amazing, I never saw that coming? I don't think so. I think people would be like, well, he's the wide receiver 1, and we've seen Lamar Jackson put up a 70-ish percentage completion rate and 36 touchdowns. So I'm all in on that.
Yeah, see, and that's why he's a buy and sell for me, because if I can get him in that wide receiver 4 range, like where you're talking about ADP being at 39, I love that, and I think there is a chance that he bounces up into low-end wide receiver 2. I mean, we saw that with Brown going. I think he even finished in 2020 in the high-end wide receiver 2. I think there's some opportunity there. I'm wondering if that ADP is still a little bit impacted from before the Brown trade, because what I've seen recently, which is a situation where I would sell him, is people talking about he's going to be a top 12 player because Lamar Jackson's going to throw it all over the field. If that's the train you find somebody on, take the win there, because I just don't think the Ravens are going to produce a top 12 wide receiver the way they're running the offense right now.
My dumpster dive for the wide receivers is Kenny Galladay. I mean, yeah, it's not a great situation, but man, the more I look at it, I'm like, Kadarius Toney is dynamic, but he seems like he's off the rails a little bit. Wan'Dale Robinson is dynamic, but we're not necessarily sure. Is Wan'Dale more of a replacement for Sterling Shepard, who they basically said, "Hey, we'd love to keep you around, but this is what it's going to cost you to stay on this team. You're going to have to take a big fat pay cut." Shepard has been good. I could see Wan'Dale Robinson stepping in to the Sterling Shepard role. And we read article after article where Brian Daboll is saying, look, I just want Daniel Jones to rip it. Just grip it and rip it. Let it go. Throw it up there. Let those guys go make plays. Don't be afraid of turning the ball over. And that's what Kenny Galladay does. He's 6'3" and 210 pounds. He runs well. And he'll go up over the defensive back and make the catch. And so I'm like thinking, offer a late second, early third round rookie pick for him and see how people react. They may go, you're fucking crazy, or they may go, I'm done with Kenny Galladay. I'll get rid of him. That team is a train wreck. But all the talk coming out of there is Brian Daboll saying, see big guy, throw ball to big guy, even when little guys are close. And it's just like, stop overthinking it. And I feel like there's going to be an opportunity. Galladay may only have a 50% catch rate this year, but I could definitely see him with a 17 to 20 yards per catch season. So go buy Kenny Galladay. He's wide receiver 57, pick 134. That's what, 14th round. He's going in startups. At that point, that's a beautiful flyer, because if it ends up working out and Daniel Jones is like, you know what, to hell with it, I'm going to let it fly. It could be magic.
All right. Well, we're going to close out with tight end, and I'm going to put these two guys out there together. Both of them have been high performers, and the question is whether or not it's time to sell at the top end of their value. And these two tight ends are Travis Kelce of the Chiefs, who for a long time was not only the number one tight end, but also a clear positional advantage. We saw that come back to a little bit of a pack last year with a group of guys kind of emerging at that position. And the other one is Darren Waller, who seemed like he was tracking to be the Mark Andrews of the Raiders. We saw Hunter Renfrow emerge a little bit last year. Now they have gone out and traded for Devontae Adams, who has traditionally been a target hog. How are you feeling about these two tight ends who are going still pretty high among the group of tight ends?
Well, Kelsey's going as tight end 1. Waller is going as tight end 5. Kelce at pick 15 and Waller at pick 40. So Waller is going in the third round or fourth round, whereas Kelsey's like the third pick of the second round. So at value, I probably want Waller, but I have huge concerns about Waller's volume. I think he's still going to be good, but I feel like he's sliding down. When they signed Adams and expressed their love for Renfrow, I mean, it's like they basically were like, you know what, this has been working, but the Devontae Adams thing, and I can't get over the feeling that Derek Carr is going to force the ball to Devontae Adams. He's going to say, look, let's show everybody how right we were for you to come here. And I could see Devontae having a Cooper Kupp-like season this year. But at what cost to Darren Waller? And so Waller is a sell for me. If I can sell him at tight end 5 value, he may still finish as tight end 8. But there's a lot of tight ends. Tight ends are fluky. they pop up with, it doesn't take but a few touchdowns to have a tight end jump 4, 5, 6 spots in the tight end rankings. So it's easy to see Waller dropping down. I think Kelsey, you're right, Joe. He's going to get attention, but he's always gotten attention. You can only cover him with so many guys. They're not going to put 5 guys on Travis Kelsey. And I also think that they're going to if I can sell Kelsey based on the perception that he's the only show in town, to me, I think that's huge. If you can sell him for first round value, first round startup value, get the types, get a couple good picks for him. I think it makes sense to sell him now. He is 31 years old, 32 years old. And while I love Travis Kelsey, and if you sell him now, you're probably giving up the advantage for this year. But I do think that he's headed into the sunset of his career. They would both be sells for me, honestly.
He is 32, getting close to 33. He's an October birthday.
Okay.
So they're both big sells for me as well. And I think this is where you almost have to adopt that old Patriots mentality of you'd like to be a year too early and get a big return than a year too late. And we started seeing signs last year of some shifting in the Kansas City offense. And I think that might be one of the reasons they were okay with moving on from Tyreek Hill. We saw Kelsey be a little more boom or bust than we'd seen before. And we saw him come back to a pack of tight ends a little bit. And I think we've seen also Kansas City has shifted to getting a plurality of weapons because of that formula that took them to the Super Bowl early on and got them a Super Bowl. People started adjusting to defensively, and now Kansas City needs to make an adjustment. And I think we're in the midst of that. And to me, Kelsey, people were starting to fade down on Kelsey a little bit. Now everybody's right back on the Kelsey hype train because of the Hill move. And I think that makes it the best time to sell high. Waller, we already started to see toward the tail end of last season when Hunter Renfrow started to become a bigger part of the offense that the target share that he was having at the beginning, I think that first game of the season on Monday night for the Raiders, they targeted him like 24 times. It looked like Carr only had eyes for Darren Waller. That started to come down a little bit as he went through the season. And you're right, with Devontae Adams and now Josh McDaniels and running a new system in there, I think Darren Waller's still talented. He's still going to be good as a tight end. But you're talking about if he's going at pick 40, there's a lot of wide receivers and running backs I'd rather have.
Yeah. So my dumpster dive tight end is the one and only David Njoku of the Cleveland Browns. I know there's questions at quarterback, but they let Austin Hooper walk. They got rid of him. They drafted Hunter Bryant last year, and he has flashed. They've got a couple blocking tight ends. David Njoku, they extended him. I think what the Browns said was, hey, we've got this weapon, and it is somebody we have to use. He's going off the board at tight end 20. So he's a low-end tight end too. Pick 174. That's like round 15, is it? Somewhere around 16. He's going to be the starting tight end. He's a decent blocker, but he's a phenomenal I'm going to not say phenomenal receiver because his hands come into question sometimes. But he gets open and he can make big plays. He's got really, really good speed, but he's 6'4" and 250 pounds. And when he catches the ball, he's got the ball in his hands. The guy is just tough to bring down. He's got great speed. And if I'm picking in the 15th round and I'm looking for a flyer at tight end, this is a guy I'm all in for. I'm trying to acquire to bolster my tight end crew. And at tight end 20, it's not that big a leap to get to tight end 10. I think he's going to get good volume. I think he's going to get good touchdown opportunities. I'm all in on David Njoku.
Well, there you have it. A few by ourselves. We may have to bring this back in a couple of weeks. There were a lot of other fun people to look at, and I'm sure Matt would have some fun input as well. But hopefully, as you're out there, rookie drafting and wheeling and dealing, this gives you an idea of some of the feelings we have for these guys. And good luck out there in those trading waters. We will be back on Monday, probably all three of us back together, hopefully. But until then, have a great weekend.
Hasta la vista, baby.